our science has convinced us that there was a time before the emergence of life when this entire cosmic epoch was entirely inorganic. But because the universe consists of actual occasions, and because actual occasions have an inherent aim toward richness and depth of value, there's a tendency for these simple actual occasions to self-organize and to enter into interesting dances with each other. Right? So subatomic occasions become atoms, and atoms become macromolecules, and macromolecules then become cells. And that each one of these jumps, higher grade occasions enter into the picture. So let's look at the cell, right? We could say that in a cell, in order to start, a cell requires a dissipative system of macromolecules. A bunch of macromolecules in some kind of whirlpool or something like that, right? That's interesting compared to hydrogen atoms out in interstellar space. A soup of macromolecules is very interesting, right? So this soup of macromolecules could either, let's just say it could generate a higher grade occasion. The higher grade occasion could come into being if there was an aim at satisfaction which came at that place and time and could then create a self-organizing system because it would begin to interact with those macromolecules. Right? So a higher grade occasion comes into being when the conditions for it arise. Then there's a question of whether these higher grade occasions are created in the course of evolution, or whether they pre-exist and descend into the physical world. We can bracket that question. We don't have to worry about it right now. But the point is this, that once, let's even go with the more conservative assumption, which is that they're created. So evolution is going along, we have macromolecules, and then these higher grade living occasions begin to come in, forming cells. Right? When the cells die, there's no reason that these higher grade intelligences have to die, because they can create a sufficiently interesting environment for each other. And they can then stay in existence by bringing each other into existence because they're sufficiently complex to do that. And so even if we don't start with pre-existing transphysical worlds, we can imagine that those transphysical worlds could come into being in the course of evolution. Okay, so then to summarize very quickly, we have a new picture of reality in which there's a physical world made of inorganic occasions with causal interactions happening among them. And then we have higher grade actual occasions, and these higher grade actual occasions enter into special causal relations with lower ones through the influencing their aim, and enter into efficient causes with each other, although these efficient causes are empathic and telepathic. And then there are also other worlds, other higher grade actual occasions forming themselves into worlds, and some at least of these higher grade disembodied beings, including notably dead people, can have causal interactions with us in the physical world through primarily our personalities at their own level. Right? So now we have a new metaphysics and a new cosmology to work with. And this new metaphysics and cosmology, I will suggest, is adequate to our needs at this time. Okay. Yes, Stuart.
How do you distinguish between metaphysics and cosmology?
Metaphysics is the description of what is actual, of what always is the case. Right? So metaphysics, as Whitehead says, is a tentative articulation of the ultimate generalities of experience. A tentative articulation of the ultimate generalities of experience. What is always true whenever anything is happening? For example, a metaphysical statement would be, there is no actuality without consciousness. That's metaphysical. Then the question is, how do the ultimate metaphysical realities stir themselves up into a universe? And what's the story of the universe? Right? So this is a metaphysics of actual occasions with the cosmology of multiple worlds. Good question.
that being distinguished, metaphysics different from the transphysical?
Yes, there are two different uses of the term. The term metaphysics has come to mean in popular language things that are beyond the physical world. But in philosophy, metaphysics just means the study of the ultimate generalities of experience. The word comes from Aristotle, not actually from Aristotle. The word comes from systematizers of Aristotle. And they put together all his notes on physics in one book. And then the book that came after that was a book on first philosophy, which was called metaphysics because that means after physics. Right? So that's how the word came into being. But in philosophy, what it means is ontology, the study of being, epistemology, the study of knowledge. Right? It's the most basic philosophy is metaphysics.
Did I understand that you were suggesting that we need to have a system of measuring these transphysical worlds?
No, not exactly, but that's a very good question. What I'm suggesting is that we need a way of intelligently understanding distance in those worlds. But it will not be measurement. It can't be measurement because there's no rulers and clocks in transphysical worlds. And because the space-time is not metrical. It's a different kind of space-time. And so we cannot extend measurement there. But on the other hand, it'd be nice to know more about distance in those worlds. You know, modern physics is all about causal effects over spatial and temporal distances. If we want anything like that in the transphysical worlds, we have to be able to define distance. How is it that I am closer to some people than I am to others? What does that mean? We think of it as a metaphor, but it's more than a metaphor because it stands for a facility in causal transmission, an actual material interaction. How do we make sense of that? I'm convinced that there is a logic of distance in the transphysical worlds. I think that the level of prediction that we can achieve in the physical worlds, we will never achieve in the transphysical worlds because the scope of freedom is much greater there. But still, we don't know a thing about it. And it'd be nice to know something about it. And I have an intuition that we can extend logic to be able to say interesting and helpful things about distance and causal transmission in the transphysical worlds. But exactly what that looks like, I don't know.
Is it possible that consciousness could be considered like another dimension?
What does that mean?
That everything exists not in this grid of time and space, but there's another element that's always there, and it's another entity in the world. It's another, I don't know, I'm just kind of groping.
Well, you see, when we come up with a philosophy, we have to start with a set of abstractions. And the set of abstractions, as Whitehead says, need to be coherent with each other. And the way he defines that is, I don't know how to translate it. All I can, except by starting out with his words. He says, when a set of concepts is coherent with each other, what is unique about each one cannot be defined apart from reference to the others. You need all of them to understand any one. Right? And there has to be a set because the universe is coherent, and so our concepts ought to be coherent. And so I'm suggesting that consciousness is one of the basic factors in reality. That we have to have consciousness, we have to have something like energy, we have to have something like value, right? Energy, consciousness, value, and we have to have some kind of forms or ideas. Right? Without those four elements, we can't even get started. And so those are, in some sense, for this metaphysics, those are the ultimate factors. Consciousness, energy, determinate possibility, and value. This is what Sri Aurobindo calls being, consciousness, force, and bliss. And that we can't speak coherently about reality unless we acknowledge these four factors as basic.
So you could have a universe or another epoch where we could take time out, for example.
Well, I don't know. You see, I'm not saying, what I'm suggesting is that as far as I can tell, which doesn't say very much, right? But as far as I as an embodied human intelligence can tell, those factors are necessary for any actual world. Now, that may just be a statement of the limits of my imagination, but metaphysics is always subject to the limits of imagination. I can't imagine a world that wouldn't have those four factors involved in it. That's, for me, that defines actuality. Who knows what's possible, but that's what I'm saying as a metaphysician, that's the limits of my imagination.
Everything in the actual world and the abstract world requires consciousness.
Well,
Is that what you're saying? Maybe
everything in the
requires-
actual world, there's nothing actual that is not conscious. However, we can consider possibilities in abstraction from consciousness, but in fact, they don't even exist without consciousness.
So is the implication that consciousness itself then is infinitely coherent or infinitely congruent within itself, and maybe at that level be the highest grade?
I want to resist that. You see, yes, it's coherent. However, there's a very strong tendency in our culture to split consciousness and matter and make them two different things. And then to say, well, everything is matter, scientific reductionism, or everything is consciousness, which is certain kinds of New Age spirituality. What I'm saying is that it is incoherent to imagine one of those without the other. They're always there in every actuality. And so we can't say everything is ultimately consciousness or really consciousness, any more than we can say everything is energy or matter. That those two terms are simply meaningless apart from each other. And I really want to, this is what panpsychism or panexperientialism is about. So it may be possible for us to have an experience like the experience of samadhi or nirvana, in which we experience what seems like pure consciousness abstracted from the possibility of manifestation or from energy. But that's simply an abstract experience. It's an exclusive concentration. But in actuality, consciousness and energy, or consciousness and force, are inseparable. Any movement of consciousness is force, and any force is the expression of a conscious movement. Is that? But you may be asking something else, though.